Okay, hello there. This is Manny from Schools of Mastery. Want to tell you exactly how to activate your brain. And I'm going to talk about mostly about the left and right neocortex, but I'm also going to talk about the prefrontal cortex, the cerebellum, and things in the back as well. So, to activate it, you're going to have to, there's certain parts you have to give yourself up to these teachings to understand and kind of do it from there. So, we're going to talk about the left, so if you want to, let's say, skip this, I recommend not skipping this and not going to the other videos because you're going to miss out a lot. Okay, so I'm going to draw the brain, like the left brain. We're going to talk about the neocortex of the brain. So if this was... Alright, so let's say this is the front. Okay, so this is the right neocortex, and this is the left neocortex. This is the prefrontal cortex, and then the cerebellum will get like a different shift when we'll get to it very soon. But we'll just talk about this for a second. So the top, there's three parts of the brain. I'll try and draw this one out for you. And there's the neocortex. This is the mammalian part of the brain, and there's the reptilian cortex, which deals with like your motor functions. This your your very deep thinking, which is more into like the root nature of who you are, as like animalistic tendencies or how things about your body's processes and stuff like that. When you activate more parts of your brain, you're gonna start to see more things you're gonna be able to do, or things you understand. We understand things at a higher level. You're able to do things you didn't think were necessarily possible. The more you activate your brain, the more you activate your heart center as well. So, when it comes to the right part, with the top part of the brain, which we'll just say the top part, and just I'll just do it with my head. So the top part of the brain, which is up here, right? And then there's like the mammalian part of the brain, and then there's the reptilian cortex. There's three parts of the brain. I'm getting this from Mark Passio's. He was a previous Satanist priest for Satanism. For all that, and he explained, he kind of got out of that, and he explained like what everything was all about. He got out of Satanism and he starts explaining things. It's really cool. So what they know. So I'm gonna explain that in a second too. So when it comes to the reptilian part of the brain, that deals with more, like I said, your motor functions and things about your survival, your base needs, your fight or flight kind of syndrome, these kinds of things. Kind of deals with that. The mammalian part of the brain is more like where the seat of the soul is at, also where your emotions kind of run. So the mammalian part of the brain would be, if you were to drill down here and go and drill here where they meet, that's where the mammalian part of the brain is sort of located. It's like where the pineal gland is. Pineal gland, we'll get into pineal gland in some other video. But then in the movie The Matrix, Neo, the right part of the brain, it's the merging of the neocortexes inside. So the top part is called the neocortex, which is like the higher creative thinking, thing that does like like poetry or do some intense analyzing or things that higher functions, like not something that like regular animals can necessarily do. Sort of like higher functions, they can do that. Someone can do certain things, but we have like higher functions, the higher functions of the brain. So that being said, the best part about this is once you're able to actually merge the two and have them both in unison. And from there, you'll be able to see a lot more things clearly. Some people are lower left brain dominant, some people are more right brain dominant. And without being balanced, you can kind of get a lot of weird results in your reality, because what you're thinking is a reflection of what reality is. So as above, so below. So what you're thinking up here is actually what you're thinking in general is what creates these thought processes all around. So if you can control the mind, you can control the body, you can control the reality that you see fit. If you have mixed results in your reality, or reality that's really out of balance, usually it has to do with because your life is out of your life is out of balance. So, like for example, like your ability to create it doesn't matter. All right, you'll find out in a second. So with the left, people who are left brain dominant, this is what happens. I'm going to explain to you like the symptoms of what happens when you're left brain dominant, right brain dominant. When you're left brain dominant, you tend to be analytical, so analytical, like you're extremely analytical, where you can let's say not have like a heart. You will not necessarily put your heart in your decisions. You'll be more like, if you're like a police officer, you just take orders and you just kind of do them. You don't necessarily think about what you're doing it for, repercussions for what you're doing. You're not necessarily thinking of, you're just following orders, and you're kind of more of a mental slave in that sense. Okay, more like control based. You want to control things a lot, too much. Okay, this is when it's out of balance. When you're going to do it too much. There's management. You can do things when you're in life. You're able to do things when you're balanced, but when you're in the holy part, which I'm going to get into that in a second, you're able to do more things when you're able to have both sides balanced. So I'm going to explain to you what happens in your right side. The right side, if you're too much of that one, you tend to be extremely religious. You can tend to be overly emotional. You can do things based off of emotion, not necessarily through logic. Like usually, where somebody, an extremist person would say, you know, I shouldn't do that because then this would happen, but a more right-brain person would say, I should do that because it feels good. It feels like I should be doing that, and you kind of go in and you fuck things up, for lack of a better word. You mess things up really bad. So that's what happens when you're kind of right-brain. But to activate now, what's important, because some people have the right brain, but their left brain will be totally out of whack. I met people like this. They're out of, they're in disorder, okay? So when you have them both balanced, so you're having, like, because the right brain, I would tell you how to, left brain you can activate, we'll get into that in another video. I'll tell you exactly how to activate the left brain and the right brain, and how you'll activate the prefrontal cortex, which is in the front, but you have to activate both so that, because I used to have, and this is going to be my personal account, I used to have my left brain activated, but my right brain was dormant. That led me to Satanism, and it led me to like all these satanic sort of beliefs. I didn't necessarily know that Satan was actually controlling my life. I didn't know that until I was able to figure it out by activating the right brain, and I actually saw Satan for what it does and what he actually does, or what you could say that archetype. That's not an archetype, it's an actual entity. That entity actually does. It's very gruesome. It can drive you to insanity, to bad things. You won't necessarily know that because you'll be driven by fear. I'll be explaining more things about fear and about other sorts of aspects of consciousness that you have to get into. But when it comes to Christ consciousness, that's what we're all here about. That's what you see the most. All these evolutionary ideas from religion. From religion, you'll see all these things kind of come up. They all talk about being Christ conscious. So Christ conscious meaning Christ is like the example, and we have to follow that example. That's what we all have to be doing. The Christ consciousness era. Christ exemplified a very perfect life, and we have to live up to that. So I didn't necessarily believe that until I got activating into my left and right brain. But in the next video, I'm going to show you how to activate your left brain, or both brains, the prefrontal cortex, and activating both. So I'm going to talk about how to do it with both. I'm going to talk about left and right brain, left brain, and then I'll talk about a little bit of right brain, and then we'll go into the prefrontal cortex and how that gets activated. Your third eye gets activated and it gets open. We'll be talking about all that. Okay? So stay tuned, like, subscribe if you like, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.